Doris is 79, lives alone in Leeds, and some weeks her pension barely covers the gas bill. But her kitchen still runs on tricks she learned back when rationing hadn't fully ended and nothing got thrown away. 20 meals, one pot, built from oats, bones, and root vegetables that still cost next to nothing today. Stick with this, and you'll see exactly how a single saucepan fed a whole household for a week straight. Start with porridge, because oats were cheap, stored for months, and needed nothing but water and a slow simmer. Doris still eats it salted the old way, not sweet, because that's how her mother made it during the war years. Next is Scotch broth, and this one's clever. A small scrap of lamb or mutton gets stretched across a whole pot using pearl barley, carrot, onion, and turnip. The barley swells and thickens everything, so a tiny bit of meat flavors a meal that feeds 4 or 5. Lentil soup worked the same way, except it needed no meat at all if the budget didn't stretch that far. Dried lentils kept for months in a cupboard, and onion, carrot, and stock did the rest of the work. Split pea soup followed the exact same logic, usually built around a leftover ham bone or a rind of bacon. Cooked long and slow, it turned into something thick enough to eat with a spoon like a stew. Peas pudding is older still, a thick preparation of split peas eaten hot or cold, and it's not what you'd call porridge at all. Leek and potato soup used 2 of the cheapest vegetables in any British garden and turned them into something warm and filling. Some households added milk or butter, others didn't, and both versions counted as a proper meal. Here's where it gets interesting though, because nothing in this list was ever really wasted, especially not bones. A roast chicken's carcass went straight into a pot after Sunday dinner, simmered down with vegetables, barley, or rice. Doris still does this every week without fail, because she says throwing a carcass away feels like throwing money away. Leftover roast beef, lamb, or poultry got the same treatment, chopped small and added late so the meat didn't overcook. The real skill wasn't the recipe, it was squeezing several meals out of one Sunday joint that already got eaten once. Corned beef hash became a staple once tinned corned beef showed up in British cupboards after the war. Potatoes stretched the meat dramatically, onion added flavor, and any leftover vegetables went straight in too. Potato and onion stew was even simpler, just 2 vegetables slow cooked in stock, with dripping or bacon added when there was any spare. Lancashire hot pot traditionally used the oven rather than a single pot on the hob, so it's more of a cousin to this list than a strict member. Still, the economics were identical, cheap cuts of meat and potatoes cooked slowly until the meat gave in and turned tender. Stewed shin of beef worked on the same principle, a tough, inexpensive cut that needed nothing but time to become something rich. The long simmer also produced a broth that could be stretched into a second meal the next day. Beef and vegetable stew used the same trick, small amounts of meat padded out with root vegetables and gravy. Liver and onion is where things get personal for a lot of families, because offal was normal food, not a novelty. It's cheap, it's packed with nutrients, but overcook it and it turns rubbery, so households either fried it fast or braised it slow. The sausage and potato pot leaned on whatever sausages were affordable that week, padded out with potato, onion, and gravy. Bacon, cabbage, and potatoes flipped the usual idea of meat. Here the bacon was just flavoring for a much bigger pot of vegetables. Sardines on toast broke the one-pot rule completely, but tinned sardines were shelf-stable protein that needed almost no cooking at all. Doris keeps a tin in the cupboard for the days she's too tired to stand at the stove for long. Welsh rarebit did something similar with cheese, bread, and a splash of milk or ale, no fresh meat required. Macaroni cheese used the same trick, a small amount of cheese flavoring a much larger dish of pasta and milk. Bread and milk sounds almost too simple to count, but it used up stale bread instead of binning it. Bread pudding did the same job with more ambition, adding suet, dried fruit, or spices when they were available. Egg drop soup enriched a plain broth with a beaten egg, turning thin stock into something that actually filled you up. Potato soup needed almost nothing, just potatoes, onion, and stock, with milk or cheese added only if the budget allowed. Cabbage soup worked the same angle. Cabbage lasted for ages in a cold pantry and stretched easily with potatoes. Rice pudding sits closer to dessert than dinner, but rice, milk, and a little sugar cooked low and slow for hours. Savoury rice did the opposite job, soaking up whatever small amounts of meat or vegetables were left in the fridge. Fish soup made from bones or trimmings only really worked if you lived near the coast and had access to cheap fish scraps. Dripping toast is the one that gets people uncomfortable now. Beef fat spread on bread for calories when nothing else was going. Some of this wasn't thrift by choice either. Plenty of households genuinely couldn't afford anything richer. Doris remembers her mother calling it make do, never romantic, just what Tuesday looked like some weeks. What actually connects all 20 of these isn't a fixed recipe, it's a way of thinking about food that's mostly disappeared. Stock came from things we'd now been. Starches and pulses stretched small amounts of meat into meals for 4 or 5 people. Leftovers were never the end of a meal, they were the start of the next one. Nobody needed every single ingredient a recipe demanded. They cooked from whatever the cupboard already had. And a small amount of strong flavor, bacon, cheese, dripping, a spoon of stock, made cheap staples taste like something worth eating. None of this means every senior in that era ate well, plenty went hungry, and pennies a meal wasn't always a choice. But the technique behind it still works today on any budget, in any kitchen, one pot at a time. Doris still cooks like this every single day, not out of nostalgia, but because it's genuinely how she affords to eat. She's not eating 20 different dishes a week, she's rotating 6 or 7 of these, depending on what's cheap that day. If any one of these 20 made you want the actual method, not just the idea, that's exactly what the next video breaks down step by step. Go watch it, because knowing the theory is one thing, but Doris's actual pot ratios are where the real saving happens.